China is the largest and the most dynamic new energy vehicle market in the world. Chinese consumers want a car with better connected and more intelligent features, so we see great potential for connected, full self-driving vehicle growth in China. World New Energy Vehicle Congress.
Elon Musk is often credited for bringing battery EVs to the mainstream market, and now he plans to do the same thing with hydrogen vehicles. Elon wants to do this by using a special engine that would make newer vehicles as affordable as a Cybertruck, but with features comparable to other hydrogen vehicles that are almost twice the price. How does he plan to achieve this, and why hasn't it been announced publicly? Join us as we reveal the engine Elon promises will be the end of China. An engine like no other. While Elon's company, Tesla Motors, has done the impossible by bringing EVs to the mainstream market, it is still safe to say that America isn't the leading country in the automotive industry, and Elon Musk isn't okay with this. China has always had the title of the top country with the best automobile innovation since 2009. More than 30% of cars across the world are produced in China. That alone is more than the total production of Japan and Europe combined. This applies to the EV industry as well, with 60% of battery cars and 70% of EV batteries made in China. In fact, one of Tesla's biggest and most important car factories, the Gigafactory 3, is located in China. To compete against this, Elon kicked off the new year by pitching a new engine to investors at a private tech summit. An engine he believes would take the world by storm and revolutionize the industry in ways the Chinese market has never dreamed of. For the investors, the pitch looked promising, but there was a problem. On the surface, it seemed the main feature of this engine was nothing new, hinting at a concept that has been around for over a century, but has never been off the ground ever since. Because of the famous oil crisis in the 70s, this concept grew so popular that most engineering students back then had to write papers on it before they were allowed to graduate. Love it or hate it, as someone looking to be part of the automobile industry back then, you needed to at least have an opinion about it. This, of course, has been the concept of hydrogen-powered engines.
Why do you want the competition?
The whole point of Tesla is to accelerate the advent of electric vehicles.
These unique engines produce zero emissions while consuming way less energy than traditional combustion engines. According to Elon, the concept is as simple as it's always been. The engine would work by splitting hydrogen molecules stored in special metal hydrides into protons and electrons to produce electricity from the negative charge through a special catalyst in the cell. While the electrons produce electricity by moving through the circuits connected to the engine, the protons move through a filter that leads them to where they meet up with unused electrons and oxygen from the air.
This will be the first time an electric vehicle for more than 1,000 kilometers in a single charge at highway speed.
To form water as a byproduct instead of harmful smoke. At first glance, one might think this sounds like a great pitch, but that is until we consider the cost. Unlike the local gas station near you, building a hydrogen station is very expensive, as storing the fuel alone requires large amounts of energy. With this in mind, what makes Elon's new engine special? Well, it boils down to the byproduct.
Is that water?
That is water. It tastes like water.
While producing water isn't bad, considering how expensive it is to store and produce hydrogen gas, there is a need to produce a closed system that repeats the process by extracting hydrogen and oxygen from the water without needing to refuel. This is where Elon's new engine comes in. This new engine was pitched to come with a new chamber that is not present in most hydrogen-powered engines. This chamber, often called the Hydro-Nexus by Elon, would need very little energy input and run only on solar power.
What are the road networks designed to work with? They're designed to work with a biological neural net, our brain.
In this large chamber, the water produced by the engine would go through another process called electrolysis to separate hydrogen from oxygen. The hydrogen would be sent back to the main cell, while the oxygen would be sent back to the filter on the other side. This way, there would be little need to refuel as often, no range anxiety, and no additional expenses besides basic maintenance costs. But while this might sound wonderful on the surface, keep in mind that it comes with an over 30% increase in manufacturing cost. Yet somehow, Elon plans on selling these cars at a cost close to a Tesla Cybertruck. While Elon hasn't officially revealed how he plans to make a profit this way, we can at least figure it out through the stories of older companies and innovators who have tried this in the past. So without further ado, let's explore the rich history and many setbacks of commercial hydrogen engines. The complicated start of the hydrogen engine innovation. The story of the hydrogen-powered engine is complicated. Going as far back as the 17th century, François-Isaac de Rivaz, a famous French inventor and war veteran at the time, grew up serving in the military. During his time at the war front, he often operated cannons that ran by steam. While these heavy cannons got the job done, the moving engines driving them were very large and required a lot of fuel to work. This gave him the idea of using explosive charges to drive the pistons of engines instead of relying on steam. He wanted to create a smaller engine for the military that needed less fuel. To accomplish this, François experimented with explosions inside a cylinder with a piston as part of the engine. This engine ran on hydrogen gas as fuel, and it was stored in a special balloon designed to take in oxygen from the air, so that as it came in, it would ignite the explosive spark that ran the engine. By the following year, in early 1807, his new engine was ready, and he demonstrated it to the public by placing it in a carriage originally designed to be driven by horses. He started the engine, and the power it produced was enough to move the carriage over a short distance. This wasn't much, but was enough to prove that hydrogen could be used as fuel for domestic transportation and warfare. Nobody would invest in this sort of energy until over a century later, in 1972, when the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries got angry at countries like the US for picking sides during an ongoing war in the Middle East. Many other countries like Japan and Canada were also affected, including major places in Europe. Because of this, crude oil products became very expensive, with prices quadrupling barely a year later. There were very long queues at local gas stations, and ongoing crime only got worse. To prevent this from happening again, various government officials made provisions for scientists who were looking for more practical sources of energy, and this brought back interest in the subject of cars that ran on hydrogen fuel once again. By the end of the year, a small group of students at Brigham Young University in Utah created the Super Beetle, a car that ran on hydrogen, and just a few months later, Roger Billings, a young engineer, converted a Cadillac Seville to run on hydrogen.
The Volkswagen Beetle was for, well, a long time the best-selling car ever made.
These advancements showed that using hydrogen as an energy source was the way forward, but just a few years later, the oil crisis had ceased and prices of crude oil products were back to normal. Without needing to invest billions of taxpayer money on an alternative source of energy, nobody asked for any more. The country returned to crude oil as the main source of energy. Everyone was comfortable with this until a group of scientists from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published a long report in early 1990. This report confirmed what many scientists feared long before the oil crisis. The Earth was getting warmer at a rapid rate because of how much major countries like the US relied on crude oil products as their main source of energy. To prove this, an expert named Charles Keeling measured the amount of carbon dioxide in the air each year and found out that it was increasing, further confirming what many feared at the time. To address this issue, many countries met in Brazil for an event called the Earth Summit, and the problems discussed and agreed upon led to various policies that forced major car manufacturers to start considering other sources of energy. A great example of this was California's zero-emission vehicle mandate. This was a law many car manufacturers found annoying, as it required each of them to produce a certain number of zero-emission vehicles within a few years if they wanted to keep selling their products in the state. And this was just one law out of several. Because of this, various automakers like Toyota, Honda, and General Motors started investing heavily in hydrogen technology. What made it even more annoying was that the government could have provided the funds required to do this 20 years ago, and now private companies were the ones bearing the cost. In 1993, barely 3 years after the report was published, General Motors unveiled its first hydrogen fuel cell prototype, the Hydrogen 1. Toyota unveiled their fuel cell hybrid vehicle in 1996, and the Honda FCX was revealed in 1999.
But one that is very real and ready to hit the road right now is Honda's FCX concept.
What followed was the reveal of another concept car by General Motors called the High Wire. But like the others, it was never produced for all consumers. But there is the twist. Over the years leading to 2013, various car manufacturers released limited edition vehicles that used hydrogen in multiple ways. Some ran on internal combustion engines that produced vapor as a byproduct, while others ran on fuel cells that produced liquid water. Each of them quickly grew popular after they were announced and sold out quickly, even though they were very expensive. But none of them were produced in large quantities for everyone due to a lack of infrastructure and growing safety concerns. The 2003 Mazda RX-8 Hydrogen RE was a great example of this.
The engine was invented by Ruggero Liberato, who's an Italian. It's a UK company.
Though it was a highly demanded sports car that ran on both gasoline and hydrogen, it was discontinued after just 3 years. The 2007 BMW Hydrogen 7, only produced for 2 years, was a luxury sedan that ran on a modified V12 engine that could also use either gasoline or hydrogen. Then came the Hyundai Tucson, which was powered by a hydrogen fuel cell produced in 2013. Unlike the previous ones, many thought it would be made available for everyone to buy, but were quickly disappointed when it was revealed a few months later that it would only be distributed through very limited markets in small quantities. Producing a hydrogen-powered vehicle in large quantities costs a lot of money.
There's some complications here. Liquid hydrogen needs to be stored at -253 degrees Celsius.
And the only way it would be successful commercially is if the company sold each car at a loss. With several investors wanting to make a quick profit, no automaker out there was willing to take this risk, as it meant losing billions of dollars in the coming years. But everything changed when Toyota unveiled the Mirai in 2014, and it became the world's first dedicated mass-produced fuel cell vehicle. Powered by the powerful Mirai stack engine, the car was first released in Japan by the end of the year and was sold out in California just a few months later. A few weeks later, it was sold in large numbers in the UK, Germany, and Denmark, with an initial sale roughly equal to $70,000. This was a very affordable price, even though it cost over $20,000 more than Tesla's then current Model 3 performance sedan. By the end of 2019, the company had sold over 10,000 units, and the numbers were still increasing because of how affordable it was. Nobody at first cared about how the company was able to make the car so cheap until it was revealed that Toyota was losing at least $100,000 on every car they sold. This felt strange to a lot of people. After all, Toyota, like many automotive companies out there, had its share of investors to please.
Although I suspect the reason Toyota doesn't do this is because despite this being a car that any member of the public can go in and...
So selling any product at a loss was not a smart move, but that is exactly what they did, and the results were jaw-dropping. As of January this year, the company has sold over 20,000 units in total. And if the numbers revealed are reliable, it means Toyota has lost a total of over $2 billion since the Mirai's launch in 2014, and they still haven't turned in a profit. So how has the company been able to keep producing more units despite losing billions in the last decade? Well, many believe they are being supported by various government and research bodies with subsidies to make the vehicles more affordable for consumers in a bid to fight climate change. This is the only logical explanation. But what does it mean for Elon Musk? According to inside reports, he plans on releasing a car that runs on an engine similar to what drives the Mirai and promises to make it almost as affordable as a Cybertruck, which costs roughly $80,000. With Elon pitching the engine to investors,
Technically possible for us to use methane as a working fluid in the hydraulic actuators, but
it is at least clear that he isn't planning on selling the engine at a loss like Toyota. But if so, then how would he make a profit? Here is how it would work. Elon's plan for the new engine. Based on all we've learned so far, it's safe to say that if Elon wants to make this engine affordable, despite selling it at a profit, then the product he has in mind will not function like the typical hydrogen cells we are familiar with. Even with that in mind, producing hydrogen fuel is still very expensive. So to cut costs, the most likely thing to do would be to start fuel production at some of Tesla's existing gigafactories. These factories have large supplies and reserves of renewable energy like solar and wind. And by linking these sources with advanced electrolyzers, Elon could be able to use what he already has to produce hydrogen at a fraction of the expected cost. As for the electrolyzers, Elon would create long-term partnerships with companies that have already invested a lot in electrolyzers, like Aramco, to cut costs in exchange for a small fraction of Tesla's stock value. This partnership will only last for the first few years of production, after which Tesla would be able to design the entire system on its own. To make the engine work properly with Tesla's current designs, Elon plans on taking the hybrid approach by adding fuel cells with a small battery pack. to store energy from heat and braking. This would not only work well with existing Tesla models, but would address the problem of slow power delivery hydrogen engines are known for. To consume less energy, the engine would be built with lightweight yet durable materials that last much longer than the typical materials most hydrogen engines are built with. Elon Musk is also considering using a different hydrogen storage system. For most hydrogen engines like the ones built by Hyundai and Toyota, cryogenic storage systems are used to store fuel. This time, however, it seems Tesla is looking to invest more in metal hydrides to store hydrogen. We know this because it is the only good alternative to using cryogenic storage systems. A great example of this is magnesium hydride, a metal that naturally acts like a dry sponge for hydrogen gas when the fuel gets pumped under light pressure. As the gas pumps in, the hydrogen molecules naturally break into small atoms that squeeze into the little spaces within the metal. By lowering the pressure in the chamber, the hydrogen atoms naturally come out from the metal and tin into gas used as fuel by the engine. This method is much safer than simply storing hydrogen gas in big tanks under extreme temperatures. It is also less expensive and requires way less space. As for the small pressurized containers where the metal hydrides would be kept, Elon plans to use aerospace-grade materials from SpaceX that are much cheaper to produce. This leads us to the next big problem, and that is manufacturing. Creating several units of these engines made by Tesla would need new assembly lines for hydrogen cars, as adding a hydrogen cell system to an architecture made from the ground up to run on batteries isn't going to be easy. Many changes have to be made to existing models that would use the hydrogen cell.
Who knew that Teslas have oil inside of them? Like, you don't have to get an oil change, but that's oil because the way that it's mixing with the coolant.
This involves newer robotic systems, artificial intelligence, and modular construction techniques to make production cheaper, faster, and easier. As it has been with past pitches and projects that came to reality, it is safe to say the prototype will be ready by late 2026. But given the number of specialized startups Elon has acquired in the past few weeks alone, chances are the new engine would be officially revealed before the end of the year. This seems to be the case, especially with ongoing talks of Elon planning to acquire even more companies, including heavy hitters like Ballard Power Systems. Even now, many plans are put underway to add hydrogen refueling resources to the already growing network of supercharger stations for regular Tesla EVs, starting with key places like California, Europe, and Japan, where hydrogen cars are much more common. To maximize profits, the supercharger stations in these places would also cater to cars from other automakers. But whether this would be done at an additional cost is still up in the air. What we do know based on inside reports is that Elon's new engine would not only be used for cars, as the company is now looking at other markets like freight, maritime, and aviation. This means that Elon's new engine will also be used in trains, ships, airplanes, and power generators by the next decade. By taking over these spaces when there isn't competition yet, Tesla would be immune to future competitors looking to take over that sector in the near future. To cut costs even more, Elon proposes an alternative to the closed-loop system in the engine through a paid subscription plan for hydrogen supply, one that would be very affordable for the user while also maximizing profits for Tesla. This would be an option for those who can't afford refueling each time their car runs out, and it would work by buying digital renewable energy currencies with real money. These currencies would be used at the local supercharger station with bonus refuel sessions after each long streak. Part of the subsidies for the vehicle would be paid back through these subscriptions if the user wishes to buy it at a much cheaper price. Adding to that the strong support given in places like Europe and Japan for companies investing in hydrogen cell technology, the cars using this engine might even get cheaper than the Cybertruck in the months following release. With a cheaper starting price and a highly affordable subscription plan, Elon hopes to bring hydrogen cars to the mainstream market, just as he did with EVs in the past. But here is the catch. Challenges to expect. Despite having many plans set underway to make this work, there are many other problems to consider, including issues with the cost-cutting methods Elon has proposed to investors. No matter how cheap you make the production process today, the fact remains that hydrogen production is still inefficient with our current technologies. Unless Elon plans to unveil something that has never been seen by the science community, making enough hydrogen for thousands of cars daily simply isn't practical, even with renewable sources of energy. There's also the fact that while Tesla plans on partnering with companies that have already gone far in making electrolyzers, it seems highly unlikely that they would make their systems from the ground up, as that would only make it more difficult to keep up with demand. When it comes to storage, while using metal hydrides might be cheaper when compared with traditional storage tanks, it is still very expensive on its own. Lighter materials like carbon fiber might still be durable, but they aren't safe enough for handling hydrogen fuel, which is much more flammable than gasoline. All hydrogen engines have to be built with premium materials like platinum as catalysts. Without them, the fuel cells would not be able to produce electricity. Reducing the cost of the engine without tampering with power and efficiency is a miracle by itself, let alone making the cell compatible with Tesla's difficult software systems. Though supercharging stations can also be used for refueling hydrogen cars, incorporating the new system into spots specially built for something else isn't going to be easy. Hydrogen refueling stations need very specific equipment that has to be built from scratch, costing even more money. For manufacturing, there would need to be new components and processes that haven't been optimized yet. To do so, there would need to be a complete retooling of Tesla's gigafactories. On top of that, the staff at work there would need to be trained all over to accommodate the many complexities of handling and assembling a fuel cell system. We haven't even covered the bad reputation that comes with producing hydrogen systems. While the idea of using hydrogen cars has been praised by many climate enthusiasts through the years, it has also been the laughingstock of many people due to how impractical it is compared to much simpler electric vehicles that directly run on battery. It took a lot of marketing to convince people that electric cars were worth it through the years due to how expensive they were to use and maintain. Doing so for something even more expensive would require even more effort. Then comes the problem of stable supply, as the materials needed to build the average hydrogen cell require very expensive materials like platinum to make it work. This means large quantities of these materials need to be shipped across long distances and handled by multiple people before reaching the gigafactories. This brings up the big issues of security and stability. To prevent this from becoming a bigger problem in coming years, Tesla would have to come up with different ways of making the fuel cell. Transporting large amounts of hydrogen fuel also takes a lot of resources, as the gas needs to be kept at extreme temperatures and handled with a lot of care to prevent catastrophic hazards along the way. Despite inside reports telling us that the engine would be ready in 2 to 3 years with the right amount of funds to make it happen, chances are it would take at least 5 years due to how complicated it is to manufacture.
Where the torque comes from that makes a Tesla go 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds or whatever.
How Elon plans to pull this off before late 2026 is a mystery, especially considering how products that take a lot of time to be released after the initial hype of getting announced usually lose a lot of momentum in the market before launch day. If the product gets delayed by even a few months due to unexpected circumstances, Tesla would be easily overtaken by the competition from the day of launch. Speaking of which, Tesla would be facing off against heavy hitters like Toyota and Hyundai, both of which have been working on hydrogen technology for decades, long before Tesla even started producing EVs. This means that Elon's company has something groundbreaking that would take the world by storm. Tesla would need to play catch-up for a couple of years to establish their brand in the hydrogen tech market, which is easier said than done, and this leads us to the final big problem Elon would have to deal with if he plans on making this work, and that is the issue of market demand. Even though the concept of a hydrogen cell has a lot of potential, the question remains whether there is a regular market for the product under Tesla. While large trucks moving over long distances might put it in high demand, most customers are already familiar with battery EVs, and that came after many years of struggling with range anxiety and many other issues associated with these products. Asking them to switch to an even less convenient option is a lot, as the average person with a regular income would go for what is more practical and less stressful. While there is a demand for hydrogen vehicles, the market is niche and has already been taken over by Toyota and Hyundai, and with other established companies like Honda and BMW already in the fray, Tesla is like the new kid in the block, struggling to make a name for itself. Despite these challenges, Elon Musk remains confident that Tesla has what it takes to produce this engine. And until it officially gets announced later this year, we just have to wait and see what Tesla has in store for its users. Tell us what you think. Is Elon's new engine coming anytime soon? Or is it just another hoax made to keep things going? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.